Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine losing almost half your political party overnight.
Just completely gone, yeah.
Right, gone. And facing a massive homelessness crisis where over 2,000 families are left out on the streets. And then, having two actual tornadoes touch down in your province.
It's an absolutely brutal convergence of events.
Totally. Now imagine looking at a centuries-old divination chart, and it looks at this exact week of absolute chaos and calls it your greater fortune.
Which just sounds insane on the surface.
It does. But today's deep dive isn't about just reading the news or reacting to the aftermath of a storm. We're doing a rigorous, retrospective geomantic analysis for you today.
Exactly, because if you just look at the headlines, you miss the actual architecture of what happened.
Right. So we are looking at a mundane geomantic chart cast on July 16th, 2026. And we're evaluating exactly how it performed against the actual events in Quebec during that deeply volatile week of July 20 through 26.
And to make sure we're evaluating this with, real practitioner-level precision, we're utilizing the Deborah Holding Mundane House framework.
Which is pretty standard for this kind of work, right?
Oh, absolutely. For those of you who use this in your own practice, this framework is essential for cleanly dividing public life into 12 distinct fields.
Right, so differentiating the executive branch from the legislature, or like the treasury from the physical land.
Exactly. But on top of that, we are applying the traditional Astro-geomantic overlay to the figures.
Ah, yes. The overlay that historically gets circulated under the name Gerard de Cremona, though, modern scholarship correctly attributes it to Gerard of Sabioneta.
Right, and when you are casting your own charts, this overlay is kind of the missing puzzle piece for a lot of people, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. It's not just about the geomantic figures themselves. It's about assigning planetary and zodiacal dignity to those figures to see how they behave in material reality.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
The base geomantic figure gives you the raw elemental energy of a situation, but Gerard of Sabioneta's overlay tells you how stable or unstable that energy is based on, astrological rules of domicile and detriment.
Which is so helpful when things get complicated.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters when a chart throws contradictions at you. But the mechanics of this specific overlay, they parse those waters beautifully.
But before we even map the events to the 12 houses, we really have to establish the baseline. We have to know what the chart claimed would happen when it was cast 4 days before the week even began.
Right. You need that context first.
It's like checking the barometer before you ever see a cloud in the sky. You might not know exactly which tree in the forest is going to blow down, but you know the atmospheric pressure.
That's a great way to put it. And looking at the dominant figures in this July 16th chart, the pressure reading was incredibly severe.
Yeah, the chart promised a highly volatile, deeply uncomfortable week dominated by 3 recursive figures.
First, we had via, which translates to the way.
Right.
It represents passage, unfixed movement, and rapid flow. And it sits in both House 1 and House 9.
Okay, so a lot of fast, ungrounded energy.
Exactly. Then we have cursor, the figure of the prism. This represents constraint, blockage, gridlock. And cursor is locking up House 6 and House 8.
And then finally, we have amisio, right? The figure of loss, depletion, things slipping through your fingers, and that's draining House 3 and House 5.
So if you look at the ambient atmosphere of the week, it's defined by severe paralyzing constraint colliding with rapid, unfixed movement.
While vital resources are just draining away, it's a pressure cooker.
A heavy reactive pressure cooker. If you see this in a mundane reading, you advise the client, or in this case, you advise the government to just brace for impact.
Right. So let's bring you, the listener, into the material reality of that week to set up the comparison. We need a crisp, objective rundown of what actually happened in Quebec between July 20 and 26.
Let's hear it.
First, the ruling CAQ government launched an intense, seemingly panicked pre-election rebranding blitz. They essentially renamed their campaign Équipe Christine Frechette and executed 122 ministerial events in a matter of days.
Which is just a staggering pace for a government.
Completely unprecedented. But this aggressive blitz was masking a massive internal collapse. 39 members of the National Assembly, which is over 44% of their entire caucus, announced they were not running in the upcoming October election.
Wow.
Yeah, That is a historic political exodus. Simultaneously, Quebec hit a severe housing crisis following the July 1st moving day. You had 2,039 households officially registered as homeless.
And this crisis collided head-on with a newly announced $434 million federal provincial housing deal, right?
Exactly. So we have structural collapse happening alongside a massive capital influx.
It's so chaotic.
Add to that destructive weather. 2 EF1 tornadoes touched down in Harrington and St. Donat, ripping up the physical landscape.
Right.
And finally, a highly disturbing targeted hate crime. A fake bloody arm was left at a Verdun mosque, an incident directly linked by authorities to the ongoing societal tensions around Bill 21.
So as we transition into the analysis, keep in mind that we aren't looking for generic news commentary here. We are looking for strict geomantic correspondence.
Right, because we want to see if the chart actually called it.
Exactly. When you analyze your own charts, the question must always be, what does the specific figure do to the specific house it occupies?
Okay, let's track the narrative of this crisis, starting with the literal ground beneath our feet. House 4.
In mundane astrology, House 4 is the foundation.
Right. It rules the land, housing, the physical weather, and, the ultimate end of the matter. And the figure sitting here in the chart is Caput Draconis, the dragon's head.
Caput Draconis is the lunar north node. Mechanically, it signifies entering energy.
Okay.
It is the threshold figure representing influx, amplification, and initiation. It takes whatever is happening in that house and multiplies it.
Oh, wow. Which perfectly matches the triple convergence we saw in the news.
Right.
You had tornadoes touching down, literally, chaotic weather entering the physical land. You had 2,039 newly homeless households, a severe crisis entering the Public Housing Foundation, and you had the sudden influx of the $434 million housing deal.
Bringing massive new capital into the sector, yeah.
So the geomantic figure gives us the raw energy of the crisis, this massive, overwhelming influx. But what caught my eye was how the government managed it.
How do you mean?
Well, the housing announcement didn't look like total chaos on television. It looked like a very structured diplomatic rollout. So the geomantic figure is screaming overwhelming influx, but the optics were highly controlled.
And this is exactly why we use the Gerard of Sabionetta overlay.
Right.
If you just look at Caput Draconis, you expect unchecked growth or chaos. But the overlay places Venus in domicile in Libra, right here in House 4.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, domicile is a condition of supreme dignity. A planet in its own home has the resources to manage whatever the geomantic figure is throwing at it.
Okay, so Venus acts as a kind of buffer.
Exactly. Venus in Libra acts as a containment field.
Mm.
It ensures that the institution response, specifically that massive federal-provincial housing partnership, was balanced, equitable, and diplomatically framed, even despite the sheer scale of the crisis it was trying to address.
So the Venusian energy essentially put a very nice suit on a very ugly crisis.
That's a great way to look at it.
And if Venus was operating that smoothly at home, I want to look at how they handled their external relations. This naturally brings us to House 7.
The House of Treaties, Negotiations, and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Right. When I was looking at the CAQ's environmental deal with Ottawa that week, it felt remarkably cooperative for a government dealing with internal hemorrhaging.
Yeah, they were very agreeable.
They signed a major assessment deal, eliminating duplicate reviews. And Premier Frechette even invited other Canadian provinces to join Quebec's cap-and-trade carbon market at $95 a ton.
So what does the chart say?
Well, I checked, and House 7 holds Puella. Am I right in reading that as Venusian diplomacy completely overriding the domestic chaos?
You are absolutely right. Puella translates to the girl, but mechanically in geomancy, it signifies grace, harmony, and diplomatic balance.
It's deeply Venusian.
Exactly. The cap-and-trade offer wasn't a demand or an ultimatum, which we, often see in federal provincial politics. It was an invitation.
Pure Puella energy.
Right. Quebec presented itself as a gracious negotiator and a constructive counterparty on the national stage.
But the contrast here is just wild. Abroad, they are playing the gracious host with Puella. But at home, facing the housing crisis and their own failing poll numbers, the executive branch was acting completely differently.
Night and day.
The CAQ held 122 ministerial events in a matter of days. That's 4 times their previous year's pace. They are rapidly, forcefully rebranding.
Right.
So we look at House 10, the House of the Premier, the executive branch, and the government's visible actions. The figure there is Pure, the boy.
The exact martial opposite of Queller.
Right. Pure is Martian energy. It's aggressive, youthful, forceful, and deeply impulsive action.
It is speed and aggression masking vulnerability.
Yeah, the CAQ's frantic campaign blitz is a perfect mirror for Pure. They are channeling pure Martian intensity into electoral positioning because they feel the ground shifting beneath them.
Which brings us to the core structural fracture of the week. If the executive is acting that aggressively in public, you would expect their internal party dynamics to either be incredibly unified or deeply fractured.
And the chart points to House 11.
Yes.
Yeah.
The House of the Legislature, the Allies, and the party caucus.
Okay, let's unpack this one because I really have to push back on the classical interpretation here. House 11 holds Fortuna Major, which translates to greater fortune.
Right.
In almost every textbook, this means enduring success, protected advancement, total victory. But the material reality for the legislator that week was that 39 CAQ MNAs, almost half the ruling caucus, including senior ministers, announced they were quitting.
A massive hit.
It's a mass political exodus. How on earth can a divination system look at a party losing half its members and call it greater fortune?
It is the most fascinating contradiction in the chart, and it requires us to elevate our understanding of geomantic logic above just, like, superficial optics.
Okay, go on.
When you are reading a mundane chart, Fortuna Major isn't a lucky lottery ticket. It is earned structural success. It is the fortress that stands after a siege.
Oh, wow.
From the perspective of the party's long-term structural health, this mass departure is a necessary, earned legislative judgment.
Because Francois Legault's personal brand and the party's current iteration were being reported as severely damaged goods.
Exactly. The caucus was bloated. By shedding 44% of their members, they're clearing deadweight.
They're resetting.
Right. They're creating genuine competitive conditions for party renewal. Because the opposition parties, the PQ and the Liberals, are fielding full slates, the upcoming election is going to be fiercely contested.
Okay, I see.
So Fortuna Major here indicates that this clearing out, painful and chaotic as it looks on the surface, is the required structural purge for the party to actually survive and compete.
It forces the government to govern on policy competence rather than just resting comfortably on an artificially inflated seat count. So it's not that the exodus didn't happen. It's that the exodus was the good fortune. It's a deeply strategic read of the situation.
It really is.
Let's move from these exact literal hits to the more nuanced manifestations. The partial hits where that astro-geomantic overlay really shows its value. I want to look at House 6, which rules public health, civil service, and labor.
The geomantic figure in House 6 is Carcer. We mentioned this earlier as the figure of the prison signifying constraint, gridlock, deflection.
And the dominant public health news that week was that the government completely broke a major promise regarding the transfer of private surgery.
Right. They failed to deliver and immediately deflected the blame onto the newly formed Santé Quebec agency.
Deflection and gridlock. I mean, that is textbook Carcer. The system is frozen.
It is. But if you were only reading the geomantic figure of Carcer, you would predict a total system collapse.
Right.
A complete cessation of medical services.
Right.
However, the Gerard overlay places Jupiter and domicile in Sagittarius in this exact house.
Okay, so think of Carcer as a literal traffic jam on a major highway. The gridlock is absolute. Nobody is getting to their destination on time, which is the broken political promise about surgeries.
Yes, perfect analogy.
But Jupiter being in domicile in Sagittarius means you aren't stuck in a broken-down jalopy with no heating. You are sitting inside a state-of-the-art luxury armored vehicle.
I love that.
You're still not moving forward, but the vehicle itself, the core healthcare system, is fundamentally secure from the elements, and the data actually backs this up.
Really?
Yeah, despite the political broken promises, Quebec still maintains Canada's shortest specialist wait times at roughly 9 weeks. The system holds up the patients, even if the politics are gridlocked.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. The dignity of Jupiter acts as an institutional buffer against the paralyzing constraint of Carcer.
It's so fascinating how the layers interact.
Right. Now, let's examine House 12. This is the house of hidden threats, covert enemies, the subconscious of the state, and hidden scandals.
And the news corresponding to House 12 is deeply unsettling. It's the Verdun mosque hate crime, where a fake bloody arm was left at the door.
Yeah, just awful.
The authorities linked this to the ongoing covert societal tensions surrounding Bill 21. But when we look at the chart, the figure in House 12 is Albus the White.
Right.
Albus signifies peace, wisdom, clarity, gentle intelligence. A targeted hate crime is the absolute antithesis of peaceful. So how does a figure of wisdom correspond to an act of terror?
This is a crucial lesson in what a mundane chart is actually describing.
Yeah.
Often, the figure describes the institutional response to the house's topic, not just the instigating event itself.
Oh, that makes sense.
The hate crime is the House 12 event. It's the hidden threat surfacing. But Albus, which is ruled by Mercury, describes how the state handled it.
Okay, so how did they handle it?
The SPVM hate crime unit immediately opened a deliberate, highly methodical investigation. Then, community leaders and political figures held a joint, clear-eyed press conference to denounce the act.
So that response was wise, communicative, clear, rigidly procedural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is Albus actively managing and neutralizing a covert threat.
And the Gerard overlay adds a fascinating karmic layer here. The overlay places the Cauda Draconis, the dragon's tail, in House 12 alongside Albus.
Right.
If the dragon's head is entering energy, the tail is exiting energy. It signifies a purge, an evacuation, a karmic consequence.
Which implies that this mosque incident wasn't an isolated random act.
Right.
It was a surface eruption of deeper, covert anti-Bill 21 tensions, finally exiting the societal subconscious and forcing themselves into institutional channels where they could be dealt with methodically by Albus.
Now, a truly rigorous retrospective means we also have to acknowledge where the chart yielded no reportable data, or where it seemingly overread the situation.
We have to keep you, the listener, grounded in objective analysis, not confirmation bias.
Exactly. We had 3 blank houses this week. House 2, Populous, which rules the Treasury. House 3, Amicio, ruling media communications, short transit. And House 9, Via, ruling courts, universities, and high law.
And there were no major banking overhauls, no transit strikes, no landmark Supreme Court rulings. So, did the chart fail?
I mean, some might say yes.
But not at all. In mundane geomancy, an unfulfilled figure like Amicio in House 3 doesn't mean the divination is broken. It simply means the ambient energy of depletion was present. But it didn't coalesce into a discrete, reportable news event in the communications or transit sectors.
It's a vital reminder for anyone practicing this. Do not force correspondences where none exist.
Right.
Via in House 9 suggests the legal or philosophical ground of the province is highly unsettled and moving rapidly, but it didn't manifest as a front-page headline that specific week. The energy was ambient, not acute.
Precisely. To really understand the narrative arc of the week, we have to pull back from the individual houses and look at the terminal figures at the bottom of the chart. The witnesses, the judge, and the reconciler.
This is where we see the story play out chronologically. The right witness represents the origin of matter, how the week begins. Here we have Aldous again.
Rational, clear, communicative.
Right. And the week literally kicked off with those highly structured bilateral accords, the environmental streamlining deal, and the housing partnership, methodical written agreements.
But then we move to the left witness, which shows how the matter unfolds midweek. And we get Tristutia sorrow.
Wow.
This figure represents heaviness, grief, a sinking feeling.
Which maps flawlessly to the midweek reality. I mean, the tornadoes hitting Harrington, the grim realization of the homelessness data, the broken surgery promises. It is heavy institutional sorrow accumulating as the week progresses.
Yet the judge, which acts as the final verdict or the ultimate outcome of the chart, is Fortuna Major.
Which completely recontextualizes how we read the week.
Totally. Despite the natural disasters, the broken promises, the heavy sorrow midweek, the final earned verdict of the week was genuine structural policy gain.
Because the environmental framework and the housing deal create lasting institutional capacity. They outlast the week's crises. They are the fortress standing after the siege.
And finally, we look at the Reconciler, which shows how the matter settles in the immediate aftermath. The figure here is Fortuna Minor Lesser Fortune.
Okay, so what does that mean in this context?
This is temporary success, a tactical advantage that doesn't have deep roots.
Which is the perfect descriptor for the CAQ's performative campaign blitz. 122 ministerial events is highly visible political energy. Lesser fortune, but it lacks a durable legislative foundation because half the caucus is leaving.
Right.
It's transience embedded right into their temporary success.
To find the causal root of all this, we trace the wave points. This is the diagnostic path that tracks where the most active elemental significance moves through the chart. Here it terminates in House 11 and House 12.
The caucus exodus and the hidden societal tensions. So the hidden engine driving the entire week is the legislative churn in House 11 forcing the government to act.
Exactly. Because they're losing 44% of their M&As, they can no longer rely on their massive seat count.
They're forced to consolidate power through actual hard-fought policy wins. The environmental deals, the housing investments, these aren't just good governance, they are forced moves.
They are managing the province from a place of deep political constraint. They lean on the wise institutional protocols of Albus in House 12 to handle sectarian risks like the hate crime, while pushing incredibly hard for those structural wins abroad.
So the highly visible executive successes are actually driven by the underlying structural instability.
Precisely.
Let's bring this all home by looking at the lot, specifically the part of spirit and the part of fortune. This is where a government's intention violently clashes with material reality.
Mathematically in the chart, the part of spirit calculates the intention, the aspiration, and the core motive behind an action. Here, it fell in House 4, alongside Caput Draconis.
Okay, so what does that tell us?
This tells us unequivocally that the government genuinely intends to create new beginnings and structural growth in the housing sector. The $434 million deal is proof of that earnest intent. They want to fix the foundation.
But intention isn't reality. Because the part of fortune, which represents material reality, practical relief, and where the actual resources end up, fell in House 8.
Right.
And the figure locking down House 8 is Carcer. Total constraint. So the $434 million housing fortune is entirely locked within joint federal-provincial bureaucratic structures.
The capital is there, but it is imprisoned by the fiscal architecture required to deploy it. It cannot move fast enough to put a roof over the heads of the 2,039 homeless families today.
That's devastating.
The crisis outpaces the fortune, even as the fortune is being deployed. Fortune and constraint are not opposites in this chart. They are happening simultaneously. The money is profoundly real, but it is bound in Carcer.
That is incredibly heavy, and it brings us to a crucial takeaway for your own practice. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to consider a final thought.
Definitely.
When you are casting future mundane charts, or even just watching the evening news, remember how often a benefic or fortunate reading doesn't mean an absence of suffering.
Right. It doesn't mean a magical cancellation of real-world pain.
Sometimes a figure like Fortuna Major merely points to the presence of institutional scaffolding that is trying and sometimes failing to hold the immense weight of those real-world crises.
It is the ultimate philosophical weight of Carcer housing the part of fortune. The help is real, the money exists, but the prison of bureaucracy keeps it from moving as freely as the storm does.
Next time you read the news, try to see the barometer reading before you look at the fallen trees. Until next time.